Welcome adventurers and fellow world builders. My name is Yadro and this is Yadro Gaming. Today we're diving into one of the most critical steps in running a great TTRPG, setting expectations with your players and setting up that session zero. Setting expectations just sets the table up for exactly what they can expect in the game. Whether you're a player or a DM, it's important to know what you're getting into before you commit yourself to a multi-session, multi-year, potentially, campaign. The longer that I've been DMing, the longer that I found the importance of having a solid session zero. I've cut out a lot of things that didn't necessarily work for me that I'm hoping to help you avoid, and I've really streamlined the process, and we'll get towards that to the end of the video. First, let's break down the key concepts about what a session zero should include. The first thing you're going to want to discuss is the tone and theme of the game. Is it going to be dark and gritty, or is it going to be more of a light comedy as your adventurers travel through your world? Setting the tone and theme of these things early helps your players build a character that's appropriate for your setting. Sometimes it can be fun to have a character that feels a little bit out of place, but when every character is trying to pull in different directions, it can really break the immersion of the game that you're trying to run. The second important thing to mention are rules and homebrew that you'll be changing or adding to your game. Many players come in with a pretty set list of expectations about if you're going to run as rules as written, or if you're going to be allowing the rule of cool as well. If you are adding in homebrew, make sure that you address that with your players beforehand. I like to have that in some kind of a print format so they can actually read it and digest it beforehand. I would make it a point to discuss with my players early on if I was planning on banning any classes, races, or features from a game. Back in the day, the Aarakocra was one that people banned immediately from the tables, so players wouldn't be able to fly at level 1. Now you're seeing a lot of bans for things like silvery barbs, or things like the wish spell, things that can totally break the game, or just change how it's played fundamentally, that can kind of ruin the fun for everyone else. But just remember, if your players can do it, so can you. When it comes to homebrew, make sure you let your players know before they get to the character creation process if you're allowing or disallowing the use of outside sources. I have seen a lot of strange builds come along my way of people that tried to sneak things in on me from an outside source that I had never seen or heard before. A lot of those things end up being broken on the power creep side versus being underpowered. The next thing we'll discuss is scheduling and conflicts that may arise. Consistency is the key for running a good tabletop RPG. I often tell my players, as long as I've got 4 of the 6 of you, I'm going to run a session, even if it has to be augmented a little bit. Many games have fallen apart due to scheduling conflicts, and oftentimes it's legitimate. The real world gets in the way. But there are other players at the table that have come and have committed to playing the game. It's important that you allow them to have those opportunities as well. If you are a little bit nervous about attendance being an issue, you may want to have a discussion about what happens if a player misses a session, or 2 or 3 in a row. Are they removed from the campaign? Will you just feed them back in when you're available to? What are you going to do to handle that situation? Another great thing to discuss with your players are hard lines or topics that they do not want played at the table. It only takes one bad moment like this to just sour your whole feeling for a session that just occurred. It's best to know up front what your players are comfortable with and what they're not. I like to ask this in a survey that I send out prior to playing at the table, just so I'm aware and I can adjust things on my end, and I can clearly telegraph that to my players on, we're just not going to do this at the table. The final thing we'll discuss are the roles of the players and the DM themselves. As a DM, you want to make sure that they're aware that you're going to be as clear as you can with your discussions and your rules that you provide, and being fair as you distribute that information as well. As players, you should expect them to be engaged and aware of what's happening at the table, even when they're not in a scene. You can often run into problems when players start looking at their phones, start having side conversations, and it can really dampen a mood at the table, especially if something serious is happening on the other side. Just because that player is not involved doesn't mean they shouldn't be paying attention and enjoying the experience even though they're not involved. Okay, so that's a lot, but there's a lot of good information there as well. So how do you have this conversation with your players? Well, I've mentioned it a couple times, but that's called session zero. Oftentimes, this will happen if you all just meet out at a place or you go over to someone's house and discuss everything that we've just covered. Sometimes you can just do it online or in a survey, or just have it on the email blast that you initially send out to your players. The goal during a session zero should be to set the expectations, and so get everyone on the same page so that you're running the type of game that everyone is going to enjoy and be a part of. Your players should also feel comfortable to bring up issues or concerns that they have or things that they would like to see in their session as well. A clear session zero can put all of that in place for you. Remember, TTRPGs should be fun and they should be collaborative, with everyone working together to tell an awesome story. This is just another piece to the puzzle to make sure that that happens. I cover all of these topics anytime I get into a new campaign, and I've found that there's a more efficient way to do it, and it's one that's really worked out well for me in the last 3 games that I've run. And that's by sending out a short survey before we get started into the game itself, or before the players start to really solidify their character ideas. If you take the time to set up a strong session 0, you'll not only have a great foundation, but you'll have everybody on the same page to work in a common direction to tell a great story as well. Thanks for sticking around to the end. Please like and subscribe. And in the comments section, I'd love to hear about any horror stories you have about where your expectations weren't exactly met into a campaign and what happened as a result. I'll see you in the next video. And remember, why be a player when you can be a god?